Hello everyone, and welcome to Elevative Shots episode 2. Today, we are going to be talking about engaging with authority and communicating with influence. Such an interesting topic and very important in our leadership journey. With us today, I am super happy to welcome Lynn White, the Managing Director and Mind Use Services. Lynn, and let me tell you a little bit about Lynn, and then I welcome her to say hi. Lynn has spent her career working in high-level executive roles in the public and private sector, small business, giving her a unique perspective and understanding of the team dynamics, leadership, and organizational resilience. Lynn is an advocate for achieving a work-life blend and hopes to impress this same notion on clients as they strive to build high-performing and inclusive workplaces. Lynn, it is my pleasure to have you today in our episode number 2, joining from Canberra, so in the same Ngunnawal country. How are you today, Lynn?
Good. How are you? I'm happy to be here. This is great.
Amazing. No, good. And I think we're gonna and Lynn, an opportunity also to tell everyone that this is part of your programs, and I'm gonna leave it to you to say that probably at the end of our conversation. So let's dive into our shots today. Again, around engaging with authority and communicating with influence. Lynn, I'd like to start this conversation by asking you how leaders can balance asserting authority while remaining approachable and open to feedback.
I was thinking about this actually. It's such a complex series of ways that we can achieve and look at that. And it's almost a bit of a complex, wicked problem for many leaders on how to be authentic, but also to be able to be the ones that make sometimes some really critical decisions that might affect, their people or their team or their organization. Having that emotional intelligence, so the ability to stay calm and composed under, stressful situations, and the part that we can show consistency. So the consistency in the way you approach things and looking at that kind of thing can really make sure that you are that approachable person there. Showing empathy, understanding your team members, their perspective of where they might be coming from, and being able to sort of connect with people. Now, not everyone, has to be closely connected, but the ability to be able to sort of have empathy for people's understanding is really good. The other way too is to make sure, especially that when you're in a place of authority, is to make sure that your expectation settings are really clear. So that there's no room for misinterpretation or any gaps where people might fill in their own kind of things around what they're thinking about in that space too. The communication piece, which I think is interlinked through any kind of leadership aspect, the way you communicate openly and authentically. So you're not only communicating your message out, but you're really actively listening to those around you. And it might be not necessarily a verbal thing. It could be from a body language and all of those kind of aspects as well, to sort of look through and see what you're doing. So that active listening part is really important, and not just listening because you're waiting for the gap to sort of put in your own commentary, right? And the accountability part is also really good. So, I mean, all of this leads to consistent behaviors that people can see that you are approachable, but also too, it links to the fact that once you get to the point where you are providing feedback and open to feedback, shows that you are there to sort of consistently get resolves to grow. So you're getting those results back. Everyone should not be, above getting feedback and learning ways to go. But I think having that sort of personality and making sure that it shows that you're consistent means that you're open to that feedback as well. And probably the last thing I'd say around there is a little bit around that delegating and empowering people. So, you're balancing the fact that, while you're in the authority role, you do kind of support your staff to make their own decisions, their own mistakes, and that you're there to provide feedback, but also get that feedback from them as well. I think it fosters a really collaborative environment and those kind of things.
I mean, you got it all. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
there's so many things you could look at, but I think some core things are those.
Yeah, and then I like to always sort of like wrap up, like, key messages here. The consistency piece with authenticity is really important, and I will add the caring piece in the leadership journey is so important. And we talked about this in one of your master classes a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, it comes with the empathy piece as well,
Mm.
right? How as leaders we need to care about our team members to be able to also connect with people, go beyond the normal. And I think I was just, this is a research from Gallup, and the 70% of the team engagements, it's on the manager or the leader. So it
Yeah.
sounds it's a lot, right? It
Mm.
sounds daunting and challenging, but I think it's a great opportunity for people to actually and meaningfully connect with their team
Yeah.
members, and the accountability piece and the communications piece with clarity, comms and
Mm.
clarity, or if we communicate with clarity, things can get much better than when we don't communicate at all, or we confuse through communications.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah. It's the undoing of so many things, the miscommunication in life and in our workplace.
So now we're talking about communication. I think the next
Mm.
question like really linked to that. And I want to know, what are, in your view, what are the strategies that you could use or you suggest leaders to use to ensure that their communication is both influential but at the same time authentic?
So I think, touching on the things that I sort of said before, that being present. So we all run at 100 miles an hour and our brains are constantly distracted. So as a leader, it can be really hard to be open and listening to things around you and seeing the things around you. So
Mm,
being present, while people kind of hear that term and like, I am present, I'm right here, but the fact that the listening piece is really important, and taking in and what are the keywords, what are the themes that are coming out when people are going through and listening to these things, is really important. What are you hearing more and more often, maybe in between the lines of what people are saying, is to then make sure that you're picking out the right things to be authentic and listening to. What I say to my clients a lot is, when you want to try and influence something, you have to understand the risk of not doing something, or the risk to the outcome that you want to produce. So a risk-based approach is really a really good one to look at. So what's the risk to the organization if I don't make a decision or do an outcome in the way that's been presented to me? What's the risk all the way up to a senior leader, a secretary, a minister? What's the risk to my team if I don't do this? And also thinking about ways that people interpret and have influence through different mechanisms. So what I mean by that is, back to the comms piece. People absorb and listen to communication in very different ways. And as we know, especially with your background and, the communication, it'd be 20, 30 times sometimes a message can go out before people are really absorbing what the key component is, that call
mm-hmm.
to action be. So that patience and consistency is really important. But also making sure that, utilize as many channels as you can. So, put it in an email, have face-to-face meetings. If you've got time to record videos that people can play later when they need, if it's not that urgent. What are the kind of things you can do to really influence and get your messaging out there? And it could also just be that you know who you're talking to, what your audience wants, and making that as concise as possible. Some people like a picture. They don't like just having lots of words. What can you do to present those kind of things so that you've got diversity of presentation as well?
Yeah, and look, I think it's in my previous episode I spoke to Debbie. She's a people and cultural manager, and one of the things that it was around recognition, and I think adapts pretty well to what we're discussing today. Know your audience, right? And in the terms of recognition, we were saying that ask people, how do they want to be recognized, because not everyone likes the same way. I might like just a thank you note, but I might like the, spotlight of
Yeah.
the month. So pretty much the same here. You might identify pretty well, or you might enjoy a video in your comms, or you might enjoy, reading. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fundamental, going back to the connection piece and to understanding your audience well. What is it that they enjoy? Because it's not about you, right? It's about them and how we
That's
work
right.
as a team collaboratively, understanding everyone's needs. So I think that's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really important. And as you know, like the base of crafting a good thing is having the understanding of the environment, the context that you're crafting that to. A lot of communication, especially if you're dealing with kind of really dry content, if you happen to be in a government setting, there's no way to sort of sometimes make that exciting and sexy. So you've got to be
Yeah.
able to do it at least in an absorption way.
But it's good if you already have this foundation of trust, collaboration,
Correct.
and teamwork. Things get easier to influence and to actually speak with transparency, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The
I,
trust part's very important.
the trust part is really important. So talking about trust, and this is
Yeah.
our last question of our shots today. What do you
Mhm.
think, Lynn? How can leaders effectively engage with their teams to foster a culture of trust and collaboration? So, how does transparent communication build this trust, this culture, and how leaders can model it?
There's so many. So I could talk for a while on this one. So I mean, the creates the clarity, reducing uncertainty and providing clarity is one of the best ways to do that. When you're providing a trusted source, you don't want to have any gotchas. You don't want to have any surprises that come out, that you have the opportunity to communicate with. So you want to be able to really work to sort of have that reduction of what rumors might be or filling the gaps or uncertainty, especially if there's change that affects people personally. You want to be able to have as much pre-thought before you go out so that you're reducing the anxiety and that continual kind of change piece. Because change, not a lot of people can deal with change, especially if they're change fatigued after having multiple change things there. And it also can help your staff or other employees feel secure if you've got the answers up front for some of the questions that, they might feel in as well. It also leads to that integrity and accountability. So you're continually putting forward a very honest, open reality about situations, or you are making sure that if you're acknowledging how people might feel about a change, even though this thing might be occurring anyway, how do you make those people or the people around you feel safe in the change that's about to occur? So those kind of things in communication can build, especially if there's a change piece, can build trust. The next sort of thing I would think about is also around promoting that sort of open dialogue. So,
Mm.
what's the inclusivity that we're doing? So, is there discussions? Has there been a working group coming together to look at these kind of things before you're communicating out a change? Are you being the only voice piece, or are you making sure that others across, your team or across your organization are actually getting the chance to speak so that you're not the only talking head against something as well, especially if it's an internal change that you want others to sort of look at and champion. But making sure that you're really putting that kind of open dialogue is in there as well. And that piece about, empowering and having others own the message as well. Because if you can get everything buying into a message that you're sending, you're most likely to have a positive outcome if people are understanding what the message is and why it's behind what you're trying to do. And it can build mutual respect as well through that element. And I think, when you're saying about, how to be, transparent, and leaders can be transparent in that space, is also too around making sure that you're really proactive with, updating things and explaining decisions. I think one of the worst things is when people get directed to do something and they're like, well, where did that decision come? Budget cuts can be one of them. They're necessary and part of everyday business and organizational operations, but what are the factors that led to that if people don't know? So I think those kind of things are really important. Also, too, I think it's hard for us when we're in leadership roles, but to admit when you've made a mistake.
Mm.
So it's okay to fail. How I've done it, show an example of how that might be, but then kind of stand up. And I know not everyone works in a necessarily safe environment where that could be,
The
warranted, but you
case.
need to understand your own environment. But I think sharing learnings and avoiding those mistakes can be really important to sort of fostering trust that you're just as human as everybody else. And that honesty around what might be your organization is facing, or what's coming up from a work context is really good. And then, touched on before, that consistent messaging, but also to feedback. So if you're going out and communicating something and it's not hitting the mark, making sure that you've got that growth mindset to learn from it and understand what it might be that is, important in the long run for people to absorb that information, and making sure that goes up. And consistency in messaging over and over again is very important. And then once a change has gone through, or the message or your call to action has happened, I think we tend to sort of forget what the follow-up is. So what do we do at the end to make sure that it's there and we can learn from it? Or even, as you said before, and in your last episode, how do we really promote the positive and call out the wins, that something successful has happened, instead of before we rush on to those next kind of things as well. I think, those are really great sort of examples that people can use.
Yeah, same again. It's a lot of great things there, and one of the things is the vulnerability, right? And normalizing failure, and inspired by this work by Brené Brown on the courage of being vulnerable and accept the challenges and accept the mistakes as a role model is fundamental, because we all make mistakes, and making mistakes is the way you can learn new things, so you progress to be high performance team. So it's not lowering the standards, but actually taking every opportunity with the good lessons, so with the areas of improvements, but what are the lessons you're learning every step on the way that can get you to a great outcome. And you mentioned the feedback giving and receiving. It's also it's you need to be very vulnerable to receive feedback, especially when you're in a leadership position. And imagine if you're getting it from someone that reports to you. That will be very interesting. So that's one of the main things. But as you said, psychological safety is fundamental as well. When you create that trust and that integrity and the accountability and the mutual respect, I really like that bit, because everything is based on respect. I do believe that we all come from positive intent, and then we all have to respect each other.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And I think that trust piece, if you're in an environment that is not psychologically safe, or you don't have the trust of those, or people don't trust what you're saying, any kind of authority or influence that you have is kind of degraded, because you don't have that core piece. So getting that kind of trust piece up, and you talked about Brené Brown's vulnerability piece. You've got Patrick Lencioni, 5 dysfunctions of a team, been around for ages, but really drives home the core.
So relevant. Still
relevant. Still correct. Yeah. Really drives home that kind of trust piece as well. So it takes a lot of effort to build a really healthy, high performing team, but once you have that, to be able to maintain it, you really can deliver some great work, because you've built that trust and you've built that consistency as a leader.
Yeah, and I like repetition is the mother of skills, right? So you have repeated many times the consistency, because I like to always introduce the 1% principle by James Clear from Atomic Habits, the 1% improvement every day. I always say that if we start improving 1% something today, in 1 year will be 365% better. How good is that? So same principle adapts for if you are in a psychological unsafe environment and you find yourself like, how is that I can do all of what you're telling me? Well, if you do 1%, we trust that things can get better, and it's not a solution, but at least it will help you to learn new things and explore new things. So yeah, I think that's the way I see it sometimes when people say, look, I'm in a horrible environment, how can I thrive there? If I don't want to leave, because that's a decision people are making. So you're deciding to stay. Well, what is 1% that you can do in specific areas to get better?
Yes, yeah. And also kind of looking at that 1%, but also thinking about what's actually in their circle of control.
Yep.
Especially when you're about by environment, everything seems really hard and it's really big, but actually there's only a certain element that's in your control. So trying to focusing in on that rather than
Yep.
how to solve the bigger things that might be out of your control as well.
Yeah, that 1% of possible
Mm,
influence, it's important.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Mm.
Lynn, this has been amazing. I think we got a lot of content for people. It is my time to invite everyone to your master classes. I think you're better selling that or talking about that than me. So I'll give you a little bit of space to do that.
Oh no, thank you. I mean, we obviously have a focus on a leadership between the work you and I do. My company runs a senior leaders masterclass. We have one that's coming up shortly, and then we have another one in October, which Humanitics and the tickets sell. And I'm sure through the links you can find all those things through the business. But the other thing that we find really important is making sure that people get to understand and be educated on how to be leaders early, well before they're actually probably in a leadership role.
Yeah.
So we call it the Ops Leadership Program, which is that operational, personal, and strategic leadership aspects, and we run 3-day intensive courses for that as well, which a lot of people have come through and really taken away. And ironically, one of the topics is that communicating for influence and that authority as well. What is it how do we work through authority and influence authority, which I think is really important. So there's so many things that we need to support our staff with, and especially our junior up and coming or our
Yeah.
new leaders to
And
get
we're
in and
emerging
start on
leaders.
the
Yep.
right foot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I will add those links to the video on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if anyone is interested, please go follow Lynn. I'm pretty sure that if you have comments or suggestions about our conversation today, Lynn will be open to, answer any questions or talk about this. I thank you, Lynn, for your time today. I think it's been a great, insightful conversation. And for anyone watching this, if you want to know more, suggest topics or anything, please do it in the comments box. And I'm happy to always hear comments and suggestions from people. Anything else before we go, Lynn?
No, this has been great. I love a quick shots. It's good. Thanks, Mariana.
Quit, quit, quit. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Lynn. And I see you in the next episode. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.